Hi, and welcome back to Just Ask the Question. I am your host, Brian Karam. With me, a fellow Beatle fan, and I brought John Fugelsang. Also, I'll let you plug the book, man. I really do love the book. You want to hop in and give it a plug?
Sure. Welcome to my introduction, folks. I'm John
Yeah,
Fugelsang, host of Tell Me Everything on SiriusXM Progress
there
and the
you
John
go.
Fugelsang podcast and Substack, and my
I was going to do all that.
New York Times best-selling author of
That's what I wanted to
Separation of
hear.
Church and Hate: A Sane Person's Guide to Taking Back the Bible from Fundamentalist Fascists and Flock Fleecing Frauds. Thank you so much, Mr. Karam.
Well, you do it better than me. You do my introduction better than me. So I figure what the hell. So,
Folks, please welcome a man who has gone to prison for the First Amendment, a man who has stood toe-to-toe with authoritarianism itself fearlessly like journalists should. People of Earth, we don't deserve this kind of journalism. I give you, straight from the front lines of the free speech wars, Mr. Brian Karam. Bow down, you sods. There we go.
You're so full of shit. I love it. Anyway,
listen, I'm available for hire as a hype man. That's just how it is. It's a gig economy, so I'll be your Flava Flav. Anyone?
well,
It's better than Cameo.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, listen, I really wanted you on today because I really wanted to talk about something other than Donald Trump. And folks, John is multi-talented, but the thing that we love together as one of our passions is the Beatles and music. So you wanted to start with the Grammys. You want to talk about The Cure. I'm all in. What's it all about, Alfred?
We don't have to. We don't have to go
No,
there.
let's do it.
Well, this was a really remarkable Grammys. Like most people, I didn't watch it. I don't really watch the Grammys anymore. It's kind of.
I wonder why.
Well, I'm old and lame, and it's done for young people because it's an award show, kind of like the Oscars. The awards are kind of designed to see how high ratings they can get for a TV show. That's really what it's about. But it was remarkable this year. I love that Kendrick Lamar took home the most. I love that. Bad Bunny won the first ever Spanish language album for Album of the Year. This is freaking out so many people, Brian. I mean, I tell these lame white people, look, you just put the record on and clean your house to it and you'll get it. Okay. You're scared of Bad Bunny. I know you're scared of this. It's all like a dance reggaeton album. It's a party record. Just put it on and clean your house. The lamest white person can clean their house to this album and you will get it. But these folks are now having the boycott of the Super Bowl this weekend because they're going to have the Turning Point USA Kid Rock concert, because that's what Christianity is all about. Kid Rock literally has songs about statutory rape, but they're scared of Bad Bunny because he's a foreigner born in the American territory of Puerto Rico. So the racists are losing their minds over this. And then Billie Eilish comes out and says no one's illegal on stolen land, which we say every week on my show, but it was so amazing to hear it said on the Grammys. But for me, Mr. Karam, and I don't know if you had any thoughts on the Grammys this year, if you saw any.
I did. Before you get to The Cure,
tell me.
One thing I noticed about Bad Bunny, the speech he made at the end, I thoroughly enjoyed because it had shades of Mahatma Gandhi and John Lennon in that speech. And so when I heard it, it took me back many years. I was very happy to see it. And let's see, I have it here and I'll quote it, because I really do like it. If my slow ass computer will bring it up. We are not savage. We are not animals. We are not aliens. We are humans, and we are Americans. This is the part. Hate gets more powerful with more hate. The only thing that is more powerful than hate is love. And I'm going, oh my God, I've heard this before.
Yeah, all the world's great religions keep reminding us, but all the world's big churches kind of drown it out, don't they?
Yes, they do. And so anyway, that's why I like that. But go ahead. You were on about The Cure.
Well, I mean, just for me, my favorite moment of the whole thing was that, as a kid who grew up in the 80s and 90s, that, The Cure had never won a Grammy before. And I know that, like, I'm supposed to be really depressed over how bad things are in the world right now. And I know I'm supposed to be really depressed by The Cure's music. But I got to say, this was the unexpected feel-good moment of the year for me. To see The Cure winning a Grammy,
and it was February,
and it's only and they won an award for a song. They won two. They've never won a Grammy before. They just hit the 1 billion streams for Boys Don't Cry in the era of streaming, so their music is still very relevant. their album that they won alternative for, and they lost to Nirvana, you know, like they've been around forever.
Yeah.
Their album they won is wonderful, Songs of a Lost World. It's a terrific record, but like it's so funny, Brian, for so many reasons. Like, first off, they won a song for a song called Alone, which is great because a bunch of guys in a band winning a song called Alone is the most Cure thing imaginable. But here's the thing: they weren't even there to accept the award because one of the band members, Vimonte, just died at age 65. So, what could be more the Cure than the night they finally win a Grammy, they don't show up because they're wearing black at a funeral? I'm sorry, it's hilarious to me. And you know, the world is burning, and this gothy band from the 80s is still making beautiful music and taking their time with it. And in a world where the Cure can win 2 Grammys on the same night while literally at a funeral, that's a level of irony and comedy that is giving me hope through all the crummy Kid Rock sets we're going to have to sit through.
Living in a shack. Wait a minute, is that the Cure? Living in a shack and a one-horse
Kid
town?
Rock is to music what Bob Marley is to hepatitis. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Wow.
it's just yeah.
No,
It's
Kid Rock is to music what a centipede is to an animal. I mean,
oh
I'm
my
sorry, to a
God.
mammal.
Yeah, I mean the same.
Just
Yeah,
incongruous.
yeah. He's not a great artist and not a good person.
Well, and of course he'll show up at the White House. But
Yeah, well,
that
like I
said,
said,
we had talked about the Beatles, and you wanted to talk about they were the first group that gave people a solo career. So I wanted to ask you what brought that to mind? What exactly about the Beatles and their solo careers did you find either different from other groups, or they were trend setting in many ways, or trend setting?
yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. Like whenever you a lot of times you'll get asked, "Hey, come talk about the Beatles," and because I've been lucky to work with a couple of them and to spend
Don't
time
rub
with.
it in, you bastard.
Well, so I always get invited to come talk about the Beatles, but it's always interesting, like in the media culture, not your show and not like rock nerds like yourself, Mr. Karam, but
Yes.
whenever they want to talk about the Beatles, it's only this, 8-year period.
Oh,
And for me, if you're going to talk about the greatest band of all time, I look on it on a long timeline. I'd look on the Beatles story as still continuing.
yeah.
Paul and Ringo putting out Now and Then, which is a great song and a great Beatles song. Just last year, the Beatles just won a Grammy last year. I mean, they're still vital artists, and to me, you
And
can't
the
tell
one
the
that
story of the Beatles and these 4 men without telling the story of their solo careers, because in many ways, before the Beatles, bands were just, a band was a band, right? And if you left a band, it was betrayal, it was career suicide. I mean, look at what happened when you tried to leave the Rolling Stones in the 60s, right? Um, and I'm not saying I mean, Bing Crosby left bands to be the model of a solo star. That we saw that,
right.
Nat King Cole went solo after his trio, or Curtis Mayfield maybe, like Jazz would do it. But the Beatles revolutionized the cultural meaning of having a solo career, and no band before them produced multiple members who each had massive, simultaneous, critically acclaimed, successful solo. I mean,
All four of
Ringo
them.
had a #1 album and a #1 song before John Lennon did. And Ringo put out a lot of great solo music. Before the Beatles, this was unheard of. But after the Beatles, it became accepted that every band member might go solo. Even drummers were
Yes,
suddenly potential
especially
solo
drummers.
artists. And so, I mean, better writers than me have advanced this argument. But like the Beatles, in many ways, we can say, like before them, after the Beatles, a band became a chapter in an artist's career, and solo work became inevitable. And we saw after the Beatles that many times breakups didn't kill careers, it multiplied them. It allowed so many artists to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame more than once, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, how many times is Clapton in the Hall of Fame for how many bands? It really was something that
Did
rewired
he
the
get in for the
industry.
Beatles? No.
No, but for Cream and for
Yeah.
I don't think he's in for Blind Faith.
No, not
Um, and
haven't
also
heard that.
how much they evolved as artists. Like,
How much did they evolve as artists?
well, you listen to
Look at that.
George Harrison in the '80s. Look at that.
Oh,
I love George Harrison '80s music. I love his voice.
oh,
I
yeah. All things, starting with All Things Must Pass. I think that was the quintessential solo Beatle album for me when I was. I thought
Me
that was
too.
the first when someone outside of the group really killed it, and
That's still the greatest of all the Beatles solo records.
and then of course Paul with Wings, Band on the Run. Yeah, I
Yeah.
kind of have
I
the
have a
one.
hard time narrowing down my favorite solo albums of all of these guys.
I know, right? I love you talking about the '80s with George. Here
Well,
was
yeah, George,
one.
but George in the '80s, that's late '70s. Does your
This
audience
is
see what you're holding
'79.
up? Does your
Yeah,
audience see what you're holding up?
I helped. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Should be able to.
That's George Harrison's eponymous solo album called George Harrison, his most underrated record. But
I
that was when he
agree with
was,
you. I agree with you. Faster. I love Faster. I love pretty much everything on this album. Blow Away for people who don't remember.
it's
But go
good. It's
ahead.
a good
Yeah.
record. But, I first got into the Beatles and George in '87 with the Cloud Nine record produced by Jeff Lynne. And
Yeah.
what's amazing is that was the last time any of the solo Beatles ever had a number 1 album or a number 1 single. God knows Paul has tried for many years. And Paul's got number 1 on a few charts over the years, but not at the level of Got My Mind Set on You and Cloud Nine, which was up for all the Grammys and everything. And the amazing thing about that to me is you listen to George in the late '80s, and the way he sings and the way he plays guitar are completely unlike the way he sings and plays guitar on
With
Abbey Road
you.
or Let It
Yeah.
Be. The George Harrison, by 20 years after the Beatles broke up, I mean, we forget it seemed like a long time then, but the Traveling Wilburys was only 18 years after the Beatles played on the rooftop
Right.
concert. It was only 18 years later. It seems like decades, but it was only 18 years. And George Harrison was a totally different singer, songwriter, and guitar player at that point. He had evolved so much creatively. And that's one of the great things that an artist's solo career show. And the same
Well,
with McCartney too.
well, yeah, and you go to Harrison, and all right, so you look at that band, the Wilburys. I mean, who was God? There was Bob Dylan, there was George, there was Tom Petty, Steve Lynn, right from
Jeff Lynne.
I'm sorry, Jeff Lynne, and of course. The master of it all, the Wilbury of them all, got now I just had a mind fart, but you know him.
Roy Orbison. Roy
Yeah, Roy.
Orbison.
So
Yeah.
I can never get past the sunglasses, but I loved Roy. But
Yeah, me too.
that was a great band. But what you said about well, first of all, you mentioned earlier that I thought was a fan Ringo.
The Ringo
very
album, really good,
Yeah,
really good. And so is Sentimental Journey, and so is his first country record, Buku of Blues. Like the production
yeah.
value on these records sounds like a Rolling Stones records from the early '70s. I highly recommend people getting into the solo careers to spend some time with the first 3 Ringo solo records. They're really strong.
But there was one thing that Paul did, and I can't remember if it was. I think it was on Back to the Egg, the Rockestra theme. For just one one song, he put together a group
Everybody.
of a group of individuals that you wouldn't see on stage together until they were singing "We Are the World." I mean,
It's like Jimmy Page and Pete Townsend and like a whole murderer's row of great rock artists, all to make one song together. And nobody who's not a Wings fan has ever heard of that song.
I know,
It
but
never
tell
gets
me
played
about that.
anywhere. Well,
Do
it
you
just
like
goes
it?
to show you can put all it's I like it, but it goes to show you can put all the talent in the world together in the same room, and it doesn't mean it's going to be a hit.
No,
It's
I
interesting.
it,
It's interesting. I like it, but it never caught on. No one. I think they did that song once at like the Campuchia concert live, but
yeah,
generally it's mostly instrumental. I think, and it
yes, it
just
is.
it was okay, right? Like it was sometimes you fake great artists do a duet and it's just okay.
Well,
And Lawrence
that
Juber plays on
aside,
that. And when I had Lawrence Juber on my show the first time from Wings, I couldn't stop asking him questions about that session.
well, that would be a great session. I even like the artwork on the. That was one of my favorite albums when I was about 18.
Right
I
on.
played it all the time.
It's got a lot of good
Spin It
pop
On-
songs on it.
yeah, Spin It On.
That's the
Don't
last
Stop.
Wings record, right? That's the
Yeah,
final Wings record. Yeah.
yeah, that's it. It was, I think. Yeah, Back to the Egg. So,
People
all right,
also forget that in 1989 was Paul McCartney's first solo tour. Both Paul and Ringo did their first solo tours in 1989. Ringo hadn't done one for 19 years, and Paul had been touring with another band through the 70s, didn't tour through all the 80s after John died, and began at the end of the decade.
all right. So let's start with their solo efforts. They began. I guess the first one to go solo was George, right? He went with Wonderwall, didn't he?
Yeah,
Isn't that
movie soundtrack, but yeah, it counts.
yeah? So that was the first solo effort, and then after that, I guess we go to John with Would It Be Live Peace in
Right, because
Toronto?
John put out the Two Virgins, I believe, while the Beatles were still together as well. his
I've got an
experimental
original
records with
copy of
Yoko. Like,
that.
yeah, I mean, uh, uh, Plastic Ono Band is John's first true solo record, I guess, and it's my favorite. I like that record more than Imagine, but
This one,
yeah, I think it's great.
yeah,
But
I love this album. I
yeah,
do too.
yeah, but they did it first. You're right, and
What's
it always
and
makes you wonder, why couldn't the Beatles have kept on recording together and just putting out solo albums? They couldn't stand each other, I guess, is the reason. But can you imagine if
I
they had
think I
just
well
toured
I
together
think
in the 70s? If they had toured together
oh
in the
my
70s with
god.
Billy Preston and put out their own solo records and just done a few live dates a year, how different the world would be now.
Yes, I it pains me to admit that I'm old enough to remember that that could be a great thing. There used to be fanzines that they would write about the Beatles getting back together. I've got a few of those from the 70s, and there was one where Paul McCartney was sick, but he came on stage and they wrote this whole fictional narrative of, Paul getting on stage, and every Beatle fan who's in their teens at that time is going, "Oh my god, I hope this could happen." But it was that was a nutty time. And the thing is they did put out. I always thought it was more had to do with who was managing John than I think he. And we don't have to. I'm not here to
I
poke.
mean, I don't think any of them wanted to work with Paul by the end of the
Oh well,
Get
that's
Back
yeah.
sessions, and I think Paul needed to. They all needed. It was very painful for all of them. I mean, you watch that movie, and they still loved each other, but they had to. But even then, that changed everything. The breakup didn't kill their careers. The breakup multiplied their careers.
I would love to have seen them, but like you said, together. And the one that I think of when I think of John and Paul together would be on anything on John Lennon and Yoko Ono, but on Plastic Ono Band. Um, Remember, Look at Me, or even God. But I can hear Paul's in God. I can almost hear Paul in my ear singing the harmonies to that.
It's fun for the 70s to like look at all the playlists that exist out there people have made for, oh, this would have been the Beatles in 1971, and having a few George tracks or a few Ringo tracks, a few Paul
Yeah,
tracks, and it's a real fun rabbit hole to go down and imagine,
I
like,
think I've seen
what if
that
this had
on
happened.
or I've heard it on Sirius XM. I think on the Beatles channel. Didn't they
Right
do
on.
something like that?
They may
No,
have. It would make sense to.
it would, yeah. So, all right. So they put out first, and then Paul came out. I mean, Wildlife, I think, right? Was and then after that, that was an all right album to me. But the one I liked next was Ram.
I
That
think
came out
McCartney's first solo
with
album
McCartney.
was McCartney. Then I think
Yeah,
Ram came second. He did two solo albums before he formed Wings,
I think you're right. I think I may
and then
have
he
yeah,
never toured solo until 1989.
right.
His but
Well, I saw
his
Wings Over America in '75.
that must have been amazing. What an
Cincinnati.
album! What a live album!
Yeah, it was a great. Yeah, I loved it, and I did not get to see John live. I've seen Ringo and Paul, and not George.
I got to see George at the Bob Dylan tribute show in 1992, which was the last time he played on stage in America. And of course, I got to see George when I put a guitar in his hands on a VH1 studio and he played four songs, which was his last public performance. I've seen Paul many times. It's amazing how Paul, since COVID, has revitalized his band and his set list by adding a three-piece horn section. Like,
Yeah,
if you'd seen McCartney before, you got to try to go again if he comes back to the States, because I found there were songs I never cared about that so came alive in his 80s because he added a three-piece horn section. He just found a way to make it all.
such
I mean,
as
his voice is thin now. I would think I don't need to see Lady Madonna again. I don't ever
yeah.
need to hear Let Him In.
I
And
didn't
I
want to
always,
hear it when I heard it the first
yeah,
time.
same here. And like I never thought, I always thought, okay, I appreciate Letting Go, but when you hear Letting Go with a horn section, it is the filthiest, most dramatic, gorgeous thing you've ever heard, and it feels
Really?
like, wow, I'm in the 70s. I should have grown a mustache for this. Yeah, like McCartney adding a three-piece horn section, which he did when he was just about to turn 80. And I think his voice is very thin now. It's not as strong as it was, and he has a lot of little tricks he does to enhance the experience. And this is a really positive one. I will go to see McCartney again if he ever comes anywhere near me, because I feel like he's revitalized the whole set list, in addition to
I'm
having a
in.
great set list.
All right. So, and I like Ringo because his is more garage. Sometimes it's more garage type, rock and roll.
It would be smart to do that. Ringo
Yeah,
needs to have someone sit him down and say that nobody cares about hearing the song Boys ever again.
yeah,
We don't need to hear an 85-year-old man who's singing I'm talking about boys.
yeah.
Um, to do like when I used to see Ringo in the first tours, I'm like, okay, you're doing Boys, but you're not doing Don't Pass Me By or Octopus's Garden. You wrote two songs as a Beatle. You wrote two songs on your own as a Beatle, and those aren't in your set list. He does those later live on the Ringo Starr VH1 Storytellers record, which is his finest solo album, and I'd recommend that to anybody who wants to appreciate Ringo more.
Okay, so I'm going to the Bible here, the Illustrated Beatles. In May 21st of 1971, Paul and Linda, not as not in Wings, but issued they produced and released Ram. And then Imagine from John came out October 2nd of that year, just a few months
Wow,
apart. How's that
wow.
for two freaking great records in what, 5 months?
I missed out on all of this being Gen X, man. I don't know what to say. I wish I'd been born a little bit earlier to appreciate this. I would have loved to have seen Wings live or to. I mean, Lennon never toured, but he did a couple of live shows, and
Yeah,
boy, I wish I
I
could have
never
seen him.
saw him live, but Paul I've seen live numerous times, and the last time
Yeah,
was
me
in
too.
I can't remember the last time. I think my wife and I saw him in San Antonio.
I
Um,
saw him for his 80th birthday, and Springsteen came out and performed with him.
oh well, that would be great. Oh, and
Yeah.
I forgot. All right, so in October of '71, it was Imagine. The concert for Bangladesh came out January 8th, 1972.
Wow.
Within 6 months, think of what the Beatles released to the world, and those are all filled with stuff that like you said, you wouldn't have found that in a Beatles album. Of course, it would have been nice if they had been together, but those are pretty damn. They're substantial records. And there's
Yeah.
a
I mean,
quote for you from the time. This is from John. Suddenly you're 30, and there's still so much more to do.
but that's it, right? Like they didn't invent the idea of a solo career, but they revolutionized the cultural meaning of it. Like the four parallel solo careers model, that never existed before that.
That's
And and
true.
and the idea that a band could be temporary, that a band could be a chapter, and the auteur solo artists, right? Like they really train the audience to see individual creative voices. I would submit to you that George Harrison's solo career made me go back and appreciate all of his guitar solos in the Beatles even
Oh,
more, because
without a
once you
doubt.
appreciate him on his own as a solo songwriter and guitarist, you're like, wow, I would submit to you that if you're just listening to the music, that George's guitar solos are as imprinted on our souls as any of the lyrics John and Paul ever wrote. I know every note of every George guitar solo on every song. And,
Talk to
you
me
know,
about some of those that you think stand out. If you think every single one of them does, what
well, I
for the
mean,
casual listener would you recommend as
listen to
far
the
as
early
solo?
George's early stuff sounds like Velvet Underground guitar solos to me. His early stuff is so fuzzy and messy. I mean, even Think for Yourself as well with the fuzz box. Like
Ooh,
he just got so dirty with it, and the only time you really have a memorable slide guitar song is by John Lennon in a George Harrison song on Let It
yeah.
Be, and Elmore James has got nothing.
No, no,
But
this baby.
by the
Were
time we
you
got to the
blue?
late 80s, yeah, by the time we got to the late 80s, George was known for the slide guitar. And you listen to his guitar playing, and it's not, like I said earlier, it's nothing like what we're used to. His guitar was a completely different instrument. Um, like this is when fans would follow the person, not the brand. And these
Right.
solo albums became this incredible personal statement, right? Suddenly the solo records are more confessional and it's more experimental and
Primal
more
Scream
political.
Therapy.
Yeah, but that was John, right? Like that
Right.
Primal's.
I think he was the one who brought that out. I think, to your point, the idea of being personal and reflective in your lyrics it was around before the Beatles, but I think John, in the '70s, particularly with the album that you mentioned, Plastic Ono Band, was as raw as you could ever make
That's
lyrics.
it. Like think about Plastic Ono Band and All Things Must Pass and the first McCartney record and Ram. Those albums wouldn't exist without the Beatles teaching audiences to listen this way. And now we're solo, so we're going to experiment and hop genres and have political statements and be really confessional. And they were you could say they were the first band people really cared about as individuals, right? That was a big part of their marketing.
Yes.
So the breakup was all the more culturally traumatic because, it wasn't like the Stones broke up and people loved Bill Wyman that much, right? So the solo success was like, it's
You're
unprecedented in
picking
its
on poor
scale.
Bill.
I'm not picking on him. I'm just
No,
saying, like
I know
people
you're
loved
right.
Ringo Starr in
Yeah,
ways they didn't love Charlie Watts.
right.
So they
And the way
turned to
they did, and
solo.
in ways they didn't like John Lennon or Paul McCartney. That was the sum of the whole was greater than the parts with the
Look at
Beatles.
Fleetwood Mac. Look at Fleetwood Mac. I
Yeah,
mean, we see it play out over and over again. And now, of course, in the era of streaming music, when artists can't make any money, this is why Jack White has to be in 18 different bands because you got to make all your revenue touring. So a lot of people are, David Crosby used to say all the time on my show, we always thought we'd have a pension. And look at that supergroup. That was the supergroup of four guys. Again, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young is a totally different band. Deserves to be in the Hall
yeah,
of Fame and still
yes,
isn't. But
yes, I
like that
agree.
was the model of solo records, band records, solo records, band records. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young showed us what the Beatles could have done with one good family therapist and some time away from each other. They could have come back to it every couple of years and fought and done more. I mean, maybe it would have ruined it. Maybe the Beatles making records in the 80s and playing at Live Aid would have sucked. I don't know, but it's fun to speculate about this stuff.
Well, we certainly wouldn't have had the Lennon McCartney feud that gave us some pretty good songs.
I guess. I mean, yeah, it's that stuff's interesting, but it's more archaeological than entertaining. I mean, I
Well,
love
some of them,
listening. I'll listen to "How Do You Sleep" and "Dear
yeah,
Friend." I mean, "Dear Friend's" a hell of a good song, and I think "Dear
yeah,
Friend" actually was Paul's way of bopping John in the nose and making him back down.
Three
Um,
Legs.
yeah, yeah.
That was
Well,
definitely that was. I mean, that's on Ram, and there's no doubt that he was taking a shot at John. You got two
yeah, I
beautiful.
know. Oh, they all did it. They all did it. They all did
Yeah.
it. George had plenty of swipes at all of them when they were still a band, right? I mean,
Yes.
especially
Such
the
as.
deleted lyrics from "While My Guitar Gently Weeps." I'm sitting here doing nothing but aging. They were a bunch of complainy guys, and that music's not as interesting as them just having fun and letting loose and doing their thing. Even Ringo does it on early 1970, where he more or less implies George is the only one I know is going to show up to play with me.
Yeah.
Whiny, whiny, whiny millionaires. But that's part of who they were. That's part of the personal mess they had to go through and forge new careers and find what their voices were.
Well,
And
and
and maybe
they grew
that led
up
to
in the
Paul
band.
writing Here Today. Paul wrote Here Today because of what he'd gone through, and he was able to write a love song to John.
Yes, and so out of all the solo stuff, let me go with each one and tell me what you think their best solo single and their best solo album was. We'll start with Ringo. Ringo.
The first album is great, but I would
Ringo.
also, yeah, Ringo. But I would also say "Time Takes Time" from 1992 is such an unexpectedly wonderful piece of pop music that like they just pulled off. Everything's written perfectly for his voice. It's Jeff Lynne's on it, and I mean, so many great people are on it. And "Time Takes Time" is a special one. And I also thought that country record he did last year was
That was
good
good.
because he had a producer who knew how to write for Ringo's voice rather than a producer who's like, how much can I make this sound like the Beatles or at least ELO, which we've heard a lot in Ringo. So I
Yeah.
would say Ringo's first record, but also Time Takes Time and the VH1 Storytellers. They all have live albums, and we have to include studio and live. And Ringo's done a lot of live albums with the All Star Band. You don't need any of them except the first one because it has the E Street Band and the band on it. The first one is Crazy from '89, but listen to Ringo Starr VH1 Storytellers. It's a good live album.
And single.
Ooh, for Ringo, it don't come easy.
Yeah.
And
It
and
don't come
George's demo is fantastic of it too. George
it
wrote
don't
a
come
did
easy.
it.
Is it what? Yeah. Now I'm going to go with Ringo for the album because
Okay,
all the Beatles were on that album, and
you're
so
right.
I have a small soft spot in my heart for it because that's the closest as
You're right.
fans we ever got to a Beatles album after
Robbie
they broke up.
Robertson's on that album too. A lot of great people
Yes,
are on that album. Yeah,
yes, and it's a great. So I'm going with that for my favorite. Um, I like it. Don't come easy, but
yeah.
I also like the No No song just because I was like a callow teen, and here was a guy speaking about cocaine and marijuana and booze
Look,
and nobody.
he's the only one who ever got completely sober of all of them, and he's 86 years old and looks like he's 60. I mean,
Yeah, he
Ringo is
does
going to
look
live to be
good.
100 years old, and Look
I've
at
heard that said
Springsteen.
about a president. So
Well,
I've
Trump's
heard,
never been sober. I mean, Trump doesn't do alcohol, but we could. That's another conversation.
well,
But
that's a
look at
different
Springsteen.
conversation.
No drugs and alcohol, and he's going to live to be 100 too.
Yeah. So that I might be up there. All right. So George, go with George next. Best solo
It's
album,
really
best solo
hard. I mean, All
single.
Things Must Pass
I
is the
know.
best solo album any Beatle ever put out, but honorary mention to Cloud Nine because it's just such a special record, and it was one of the most special records for me. And it's superb, just pop music that George and Jeff Lynne made. It's a magical record. But I would also say, Donnie put out this box set of Living in the Material World last year, and it's better than the original album. They have a selection of alternate takes that's actually better, and that's a record where like George just goes for it with his vocals and singing his heart out, singing his soul out like you've never heard him do before. But it's and the best, and for George live, everybody would say Bangladesh, but I would say get Live in Japan with Eric Clapton and his band from '91, George's last tour. It's the only time he did a ton of Beatles songs and a ton of solo songs live. You can tell he's really not comfortable with performing live in front of an audience. His voice is
Right.
not relaxed, but his guitar playing's great, and it's a thrill to hear him do these songs live.
Okay, so for Harrison, I'm going to go with All Things Must Pass. I do think that, without a doubt, that is the single greatest solo album ever
No
released by
doubt,
any Beatle. No
no
doubt
doubt.
about it. And I might go with the single from that, All Things Must Pass. But then again, I might go with I
Was that a
liked him with.
single? I think the singles were "My Sweet Lord" and
I'm sorry, My
"What Is
Sweet Lord.
Life."
Yeah,
What is
My
life?
Sweet Lord.
Okay.
But and then but I might also go with what was he when he sang about the pirate song he sang with Monty Python?
Yeah,
And you think
yeah.
he's going to start playing one of his songs, and he starts playing "The Life of a Pirate." I don't know. I kind
That's
of
from
like
a
what?
Rutland Weekend Television special. But yeah, it
Yes,
sounds like "My Sweet Lord," but then it goes into this really
yes.
funny pirate song with the same chords.
But and I'll give George props for that because the Life of Brian wouldn't. As a side note, to their solo careers, The Life of Brian, he was close with members of Monty Python. He backed that movie apparently just because he wanted to see it made.
Yeah,
He wanted to watch it. So you got to give him that. So that I'm going to give him, extra points for that one. So
that's right.
Paul, that's a hard one too. Solo album and single.
This is really hard. I didn't know you were going to make me jump through hoops, Mr. Karam. It'd be easier if I can reduce it to favorite Wings album. I mean, I can't. I don't
Well,
think I
okay,
can tell you
favorite
my
Wings
favorite
album.
Band on the Run.
Well, yeah,
But for Paul's solo record, I'm sorry. There's so many great ones. I mean, I love McCartney. I've always liked Ram. Um,
me,
I
yeah,
I
Ram.
I love Tug of War, but I love when he started writing songs with Elvis Costello in the late '80s. That was when I grew up, and
Ooh,
my first McCartney album I ever bought as a teenager was Flowers in the Dirt, and I still love it.
wow, I
I
love
think
it.
his album of standards, Kisses on the Bottom, has a terrible title, but it's the first time he ever sings like an old man and doesn't play any instruments, and it's so vulnerable. I love the Fireman Electronic Arguments album. It's astonishingly rock and great. And I thought Egypt Station was a great record too. I think Paul's still got another great solo album in him. And I can't wait to see what he does. It's
So
really hard
single,
for me to pick just one. I
single.
How do you do this, Karam? How do you pick one McCartney record? What is yours?
Well,
McCartney, Band on the Run, right?
Band on the Run has got to be the quintessential Paul McCartney and Wings album, of course. And what's he's out with a movie now, Man on the Run.
Yeah.
But I would go with solo. It's got to be what was the one when he did the whole bunch of standards? I forget the name of that.
That was Kisses on the Bottom, and it's a
Yeah,
really, like I said,
I love
it's
that
the
album.
first
I,
record where he doesn't play any instruments. He only sings, and I think it's the first record where he's ever allowed his voice to sound like an old man. And
yes,
it's Elvis Costello's wife, Diana Krall, is the band leader for this.
I
Um,
love that album.
John
Absolutely
Pizzarelli
love it.
plays guitar on this. It's a terrific jazz record. He should have toured it, Brian. He should have toured this album in like medium-sized, like
I
Radio City
agree.
Music Hall. He should have toured it.
I,
His version of Always is the most haunting, beautiful, got me through my mother's funeral. I mean, just astonishing what he pulls off in that record. But apparently, the rumor is he wasn't happy with the studio packaging, and so he gave it
that's
this
what I
awful
heard.
title of Kisses on the Bottom. If he'd
Yeah,
called it My Valentine, which is the greatest song he's written this century, Mel Torme could have sung My Valentine. It's a great
I think
song. He does it at every concert. And Barbara Streisand just did a duet with him of My Valentine.
yes.
If he'd called it that and done a tour, it'd be regarded as a hit album today. Instead, only geeks like us know about it.
And what about single?
I mean, Band on the Run's just such a great pop song. I can't even, but maybe I'm amazed. How do I do this? It's hard to
Maybe I
say.
Am Amazed. Good. I like Jet. I like Maybe I'm Amazed.
Yeah.
But and I don't think this one was ever released as a single, but when I sing in my band, it's one that I really love from McCartney, and I sing it and I love it. And that's No Other Baby.
Oh well,
Are you?
that's a great song. That's from his second album of covers that he released in '99. I did a special with him at Hammerstein Ballroom for that album because he didn't do any touring, and Linda had just died, but he did a couple of live events, and I was in London, and they called me and asked if I would do this thing in New York with him, and I'm like, I'll get on a plane. And that was an album with David Gilmour of Pink Floyd playing guitar
Yes.
on almost every track, 3 original songs, and No Other Baby, which is such a great song. And when you realize he's doing this right after his wife died, it's
Yes.
haunting and beautiful.
And that the last video clip of him by himself with his bass guitar in a rowboat and in the
Yeah,
middle of, I mean, very symbolic. And there's almost a softness to that video that evokes the memory of his dead wife to me.
yeah,
So
I agree.
that to me was and I just love it as a song. But yeah, I'll go most of the time. It's I remember when he did Live and Let Die live on the McCartney special on
Yeah,
TV, and that
and
was
on the
one of
Super
my
Bowl.
favorite. Yeah, that was one of my favorites before before everything else. But there's so much that McCartney has put together. So that brings us to John. Where would you say is your favorite John solo album and song?
Favorite solo album would be Plastic Ono Band. Favorite song would be Jealous Guy.
Ooh, I'm gonna go. My wife and I had just started dating, and this
Ah,
song, and I love Double Fantasy. To me, it
yes,
was
great.
to me, Double Fantasy John's parts were excellent, and of course, we all got to see or listen to Yoko come in stereo. So that was during one of her "Kiss, Kiss, Kiss, Kiss Me Now." So
I know.
that's at the end of that song. But every John song on that album is just evocative of the things I loved best of John Lennon, including his in the one song. I think it's "Dear Yoko" that is so Buddy Holly in its presentation, even with the little hiccups that Holly had.
I
But
agree.
for me, the song that always does it for me. I know everyone will pick "Imagine," and I love that song. I love playing it on the piano. I love listening to it. But "Woman," because when my
It's a
wife
great
and I
song.
started yeah, when my wife and I started dating, that became quote unquote our song. And that was
Nice.
the song for those who don't know when John died. It was just basically 2 or 3 weeks after this album had come out. In fact, I was on a campus radio station that night, December 1980, and had just played the first side of this album when the AP alarm went off, and it went off with 5 bells. If people don't know, back then that was like calling for a war. So naturally we ran into the wire service place in our newsroom and ripped it out, and it was that John Lennon had been shot.
Oh
uh, we
God.
we ended up calling the hospital he was at in New York. Could not get through. That night I remember getting shit faced drunk at the end of the night, at the end of my shift, and then flying to New York and standing in line with millions of other people outside of the Dakota. I remember
Wow.
waking up I missed the first flight, and I woke up in my car with snow falling on my face. I was so hungover, but that was to anybody. I remember I interviewed Siskel and Ebert years later, and they were talking about when they knew boyhood had ended and childhood began. And they were talking about the Manchurian Candidate as a movie and how it reminded them of John F. Kennedy. And
Yeah.
they reflected that the death of John F. Kennedy was when they knew that childhood was over and adulthood had begun. And for
Wow.
me, that was John. I was
Wow.
19. And when that happened, I said, everything I've thought of as a kid is over with. Welcome to adulthood, where they kill people who preach about peace. It was a hell of an introduction to, and I went through. I mean, dude, I remember the '60s. My earliest memory of childhood was John F. Kennedy being
Wow.
assassinated. I remember it was his wife. Jackie had walked off the plane. We had a black and white TV. She was wearing pink, and there was a the blood stain was
Yeah,
on her
yeah.
outfit. And in a black and white TV, it looked like she was wearing white, and she had chocolate stains on her dress. And I remember watching my mom cry and thinking, "Mom is crying because that woman spilled chocolate on her dress. I better never spill chocolate." And it stuck with me all these years. And I remember Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Bobby Kennedy and all of those assassinations. But I was a kid. That was the '60s, and you don't think about those things as much as a kid. But when John got killed, and he had just come back into the public light, I mean, he had spent 5 years as a house husband. He had he had a notorious affair on his wife. And I interviewed May Pang, and I'm sure you have too. And he had gone through all this stuff, and he had his young son, and he was assassinated walking home one night. And I was like, dude, that's just, it's over. Childhood is over. And that was the end of his solo career. So that last album to me has
Yeah.
always resonated. That's a
It's very special,
long-winded
and I
story,
want.
but yeah.
No, I think it's the only. It's one of two Beatle albums solo to win the Grammy for Album of the Year.
And do you remember when it was Paul Simon and John Lennon showed up at the Grammys, I think in '75, and was it Afternoon Delight that they gave the award to
So
that
sorry.
year?
I've seen the clip, but I don't really know. For me, I was very young, and I was. I mean, at the time John Lennon died, yeah, I was also raised in a curiously Catholic household where popular
Me
music wasn't
too.
a thing. So when
Oh,
he died, I mean, I knew his name, I knew who he was, but I didn't know George Harrison's name. I didn't know anything. I had never heard the words Yoko Ono before, but I was doing a play at the time, a regional theater production of A Christmas Carol, my first ever paid gig when I was 10 or 11. And the cast observed the vigil. When John died, Yoko asked for a 10-minute vigil of silence around the
yeah,
world, and millions of people did it. And for
did
me
it?
as a kid, watching all of these adults of all different ages, and some of the older ones were mad. They didn't want to have any part of this. They didn't like John Lennon. And I noticed that too. But seeing how all the adults I so
Yeah,
respected were so moved, that was when John Lennon first really entered my heart. And then when Nobody Told Me was released as a single, and that was a song he wrote for
ooh,
Ringo. Ringo should have released his own
yeah,
version of that, by the way. But when that came out, that song was saturated on the very early days of MTV. And so that was the first John Lennon song that I really heard 1,000 times. I think I knew that song before I ever knew Imagine, because I never knew Imagine. And I didn't listen to the radio, in my house. So I never heard Imagine really until I was 14 and saw the Killing Fields. That was the first time I went and bought the
wow,
45. I bought the 45 of Imagine in like the mid 80s because I had discovered it as a kid when I saw the Killing Fields. And so I was late to all this, and yet it was a real North Star for me. And that, along
that's
with
cool as hell.
George's album of Cloud Nine, really, like, I didn't know anything about George Harrison. I knew I had heard of My Sweet Lord. I wasn't a fan. I liked the music, and as soon as, in many ways, it was the solo music that I heard that was my entry into the band. Because you hear the band all the time
Yeah.
on the radio, but it was
Well,
the solo
you
music that
yeah.
first hooked me as a kid whose parents did not listen to popular music.
Well, I watched the Beatles. I remember watching them on Ed Sullivan. That's how freaking old I am. But
Wow.
I remember the first big argument I ever got into with my father, my very Catholic father. Not as Catholic as, but I mean, we were strict Catholics. We would go to on retreat with the Jesuits every year and stuff like that. But I
Right.
went to get my hair cut, and I go to get my hair cut, and I wanted it longer. And I said, Dad, I want my hair longer, like the Beatles. And he looked
Yeah.
at, instead of the Burr haircut, which was de rigueur for us in the early '60s. So he looks at me
Same
and he goes,
here.
"No, you're not going to get a haircut like that." I go, "But the Beatles have that haircut." And he goes, "It's in their contract." And that shut me up for about a week. Then The next time I had to go get my hair cut, I remember going to my dad and going, "Hey, Pop," and he goes, "Yeah." And I go, "I want my hair cut like the Beatles." I told you that's in their contract. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey, Pop," and he goes, "What?" I go, "How do I get a contract?" So,
That is so funny. That's a great one.
yeah, after that, he let me have the haircut. But the other John song that the single that I think is just devastating, and it's very uh, personal, and it's about him kicking a drug habit, and that's Cold Turkey. A
Well,
more
yeah,
visceral song. I can't tell you how fun it is to sing that song, but you cannot imitate John's primal scream and his urges and his moaning at the end of that song to demonstrate the
yeah.
pain of going through heroin withdrawal.
I mean, he was not trying to make pop songs like Wings in the '70s. You know what
No,
I'm saying?
no, yeah, but that's a hell of a rock song. I mean, it's got a damn good
It's
beat.
incredible. Yeah,
Yeah, and
it's a
the opening
painful
riff
song, and
is
there
unbelievable. Yeah,
people have tried to cover it too, but you've got to go to such a dark place to do that.
yeah, that's I don't know if I've ever heard a real good cover song of cover version of that song.
I don't know if I've heard a good
I
one either. I've heard several covers of it. I don't know if I liked any of them.
so who do you think is what song in the Beatles solo career do you think was covered well by another artist?
Ooh, wow. Oh man,
There
a
you go.
song in the there's there's been so many. I'm trying to think of what stands out. That's like asking to my favorite, Dylan cover. Um,
Oh,
there's so many terrible covers of Imagine. I've never heard a good cover of Imagine. Like that's a song that I don't think you can do a good cover of. I've never heard one, but I've heard Youssou N'Dour does a version of Jealous Guy in Senegalese,
ooh,
and it is
I
the
like
most. It was
that.
from an Amnesty International album that was all
I
John
remember
Lennon
that.
covers about 10 years ago, and he sings the chorus in English, and it's one of the most gorgeous things I've ever heard. And I mean McCartney, wow, I mean, so I mean, I'm trying to think of like my favorites, but it's weird. It's not like Dylan. I don't really know of that many Beatles songs where we like the cover better. You know what I mean? Like it's fun hearing Ray
Yeah.
Charles sing Yesterday, but the Beatles version is always going to be the one that stands out for me. What are some covers of Beatles songs that are some of your favorites? I'm trying to think of more.
Well, I think David Grohl covering what did he cover? Not cold. Everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkey. No,
Okay, but that's a Beatles
he
song, yeah.
covered. Yeah, he didn't cover that though. It was off of Yellow. Oh, I love it's all too much, but and that was covered. But gosh darn it, what is the?
Richie Havens does a great version of Here Comes the Sun.
Well,
Um,
yes,
Joe Cocker did a pretty good Maybe I'm Amazed. Joan Baez did Imagine. Um, uh, Jim James did a whole EP of George Harrison songs covers, and he does a pretty good My Sweet Lord. I love everything that's on the Concert for George. I was doing an NBC show called Providence, the finale, and I blew my entire paycheck on Thanksgiving break to fly to London to see the George Harrison tribute
wow,
show, and watching McCartney and Clapton do "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," and I would actually say
Prince,
Paul
Prince.
McCartney's version of All Things Must Pass might even be better
Well,
than
that's really
George's.
good.
Yeah, and Eric
Oh,
Clapton and Billy Preston
wow.
doing "Isn't It a Pity" together is amazing. Roxy Music does a good "Jealous Guy." Uh, trying to think what else. I mean,
David Grohl was "Hey Bulldog." That's what I remember.
yeah,
I
I've
like
heard
his.
that. That's
Yeah,
really good.
yeah, that's really good version of "Hey Bulldog." But I think the best guitar I've ever heard on a Beatles cover has to be Prince live.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
That's to me. I mean, and you can see Donnie watching him, and he's just freaking out as Prince goes back and is caught by his
No, it's
handlers, and he's still
astonishing.
playing, and then
It's great showmanship, and it was all Tom Petty's idea. It was all Tom Petty's idea as well, and Jeff Lynne sings so beautifully on that too. But I would encourage everyone to listen to McCartney and Clapton doing something together. On that tour after George died, McCartney was touring and he was doing a ukulele solo version of something, and he starts it this way at the Concert for George, and then after the first verse, Clapton and the band kick in with Ringo and Billy Preston, And hearing McCartney and Clapton sing the lyrics of Something together for George Harrison was one of the highlights of my life as an audience member, to be in the room. And the record
Wow.
is beautiful.
Well, on a completely different note, about one of the highlights of listening to music, I would say during the Biden administration, James Taylor coming out and singing "Fire and Rain" was one of the coolest live experiences I've ever had. And I got to record that on my cell phone. And I was
Wow.
like, damn, this is pretty good. This he can
Great.
put this out as a single. I loved that. And I like seeing McCartney when he was at the White House too. And
With
but
Obama?
I will, yeah, during
Yeah, that was the
Obama.
one time McCartney made a George Bush joke, and it was the only time he ever said anything political for the first part of this decade.
Well, not so, oh well. You want to talk about your favorite political Beatles solo songs? How about "Give Ireland Back to the Irish"
I
by
mean,
Paul
it's a
McCartney?
masterpiece. It's a great
Yes,
rock song, banned on the BBC, the bravest, most fearless thing Paul has ever done. And I don't know why he doesn't write more political songs to get us talking about him. He's already popular enough. I'd love to see Paul be willing to piss off some fascists and have them buy tickets to a show. But he's been banned twice by the BBC for Hi, 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 which is a
yes.
filthy song. Filthy, filthy, filthy song. And for Give Ireland Back
You're
to the Irish.
gonna do it, sweet
For all
banana,
we
like you've never been done. Get
I
ready
mean,
for my body gun.
it's horrible. For all we talk about John Lennon being radical in the 70s, it was Paul got banned twice on the BBC.
So, what do you think? John's favorite? What's your favorite protest song of John solo?
I don't know. I love Attica State. I just think it's so thrown
Ooh,
together and
Attica
so
State is good.
raw.
That's
Just
sometime in
so
New York
raw.
City. I also like. I don't want to be a soldier, Mama. I don't want to die.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love
And
that one.
Give me some truth is great.
Give me some
Give me some
truth.
truth is it's still a terrific song.
All right. I don't.
But
Well,
he's
correct me if
that's
I'm
it.
wrong.
I mean, like John, outside of John,
Yeah.
you don't get a lot of protest songs. They
No.
just weren't very political. And I mean, they've all been brave in different ways. Ringo, 10 years ago, Ringo wouldn't play North Carolina because of the transgender bathroom ban. Like Ringo's
Right.
unexpectedly brave in different times.
Well,
And
the
God knows
Beatles.
George was too. But
Well, the Beatles also had integration in their contracts playing in the South. They burned their album. I don't know. I think they were like Revolution.
yeah,
I
they were
mean,
always oh, sure. Well, and John always was too. I mean, John got in trouble
yeah,
for talking about Jesus. That was nothing new. Sure.
yeah.
I'm
They,
just saying,
yeah, they,
like they can't all be Springsteen, right? Like Bob Dylan doesn't want to
yeah.
be Springsteen. Elvis wasn't capable of it. Springsteen is everything we wanted in a rock star. He's a better guitarist and songwriter than Elvis, but he's braver and fights for the little guy better than Bob Dylan, and Bob Dylan shouldn't write political protest songs if he doesn't want to. He hasn't written one in 50 years since Hurricane, maybe Neighborhood
Right.
Bully, maybe was, but like Bob doesn't want to do it. He shouldn't have to do it. I'm not here to impose my taste on artists. It's
But I
just
would
great
like
to
to
see
see Paul
someone like
write Paul
Springsteen,
or
like
Ringo.
Neil Young,
Yeah.
sure, but for every Neil Young or Sinead O'Connor or Springsteen who's willing to do a political song, I'm grateful for it, and I have to respect the fact that the McCartneys and Billy Joels are not going to be willing to do that, and I wish they
So,
were
what do you
braver.
think is all right? I'll. We're talking about, of course, the solo career of the Beatles, but we've just dived into something that I'd love to ask you. What do you think is the greatest rock protest song of all time?
Man, yeah, you should have given me time to prepare for this. Um,
It
rock
just came to
protest
me,
song of all
John. It just
time.
came to me. Yeah,
Rock protest song of all time. I mean,
yeah,
I'm gonna say something and then think of something better. Like for what it's worth. I mean,
yep.
uh, you know, best protest song of all time for me is Billie Holiday's "Strange Fruit." I mean,
Ooh,
the kind of protest song that they'll write books about, that speaks a truth that journalism and politicians can't do. I think obviously "Fortunate Son" is the gold standard. I think
yeah.
"Born in the USA" is a really great pop song because after 40 years, it's still so misunderstood. I think "Rage Against the Machine's" "Killing in the Name," "Ohio" by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, anything by Public Enemy. I mean, "Fight the Power," so much Public Enemy music.
Yeah,
The
for what it's
Childish
worth.
Gambino song "This Is America." I mean, it's all coming in hip hop now. All the good protest songs,
Yeah, there's no rock and roll left. But for what it's worth, was the one that got me into pro. But "For Dead in Ohio" was huge. "Revolution" by the Beatles
Yeah,
was
great.
huge. Uh,
That's a
all of
protest
those,
song about protest songs.
yeah. I know you gotta love that. Always a little tongue in cheek.
Mississippi
Oh,
Goddamn by Nina Simone. I guess that wouldn't count
ooh,
as rock and roll. Neither would The Message by Grandmaster Flash, but I mean, The Change Is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke is the greatest protest song. How about that? That's my answer.
well, I
No,
go with
Bob Marley Redemption Song. We can
yeah.
do this all night, Karam. I mean, I'm trying to, but Change Is Gonna Come, I would say, is probably the best.
Ain't really a life, ain't really a life, ain't nothing but a movie. But that's somebody else. But yeah, I like for what it's worth a guitar intro to that.
Me too.
That's so
And
I
Stephen Stills remade that song with Public Enemy for He Got Game, and it's a terrific protest song about a very different kind of protest about the commodification of black men in professional sports. And Stephen Stills sings in it, and he plays for what it's worth the guitar line. And Flava Flav is awesome, and it's maybe my favorite Public Enemy song of all time. He Got Game.
wow.
Trust me, lame white people, it's terrific. It'll turn you on.
So as we come to the God, I could do
And
this all day.
Tracy Chapman, Bang Bang Bang, the best protest song ever about gun violence.
Ooh.
Best protest song ever about gun violence. Bang 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 by Tracy Chapman.
Not happiness is a warm, yes, it is gun. But
I don't really think that's a protest song.
no, he wrote it after reading the NR. There was a magazine that he picked up. As
Yeah, I mean, it's ironically a protest song. You're right.
yeah.
And of
But
course, we could spend all night talking about Bob Dylan here. I mean, Hurricane.
yeah. So
times they are
as it
changing.
come to the end, what if you were going to put on just today? Just say it's not your favorite album, but if you're going to put on a solo album of the Beatles after this conversation, what do you want to put on?
Ooh, man. I will put on George Harrison's eponymous solo album, George Harrison from the late 1970s, which you held up before.
Yes.
It is the epitome of what people call yacht rock, but it is also George Harrison in the late 70s. After he has fallen in love and gotten married and become a dad for the first time and gotten his obligatory Hendrix perm. And it is George Harrison with a guitar writing just simple, beautiful music, most of which hasn't been remembered. And it is, I would say, the most underrated of all the solo Beatles albums. What would you say, Brian?
Well, I like this album a lot. I always did. I bought it, as you can. It's still in the original cover, and I bought it for $4.99 on sale at Karma Records when I was a kid. But what I liked was his answer to "Here Comes the Sun" was "Here Comes the Moon." I like "Faster, Master, Going Fast." I love that song. "Dark Sweet Lady."
Dark Sweet Lady is a great song.
Blow
Away
Away
is a great song.
Yeah, and that was one of the first songs I ever played in a rock and roll band. Was wow. That, and so that was that, and I always hold up. I've collected these for years back in the '60s, and I wore just for today for you. And these are the buttons that are actually worth something. There were 4 of these. I think he's with a dove. John is got the it's red and orange. Remember the radiating or around him, and then Paul I think has a. I think he's got something in his hand, and George is looking like the psychedelic. Yeah, that I've got all 4 of those somewhere. But
Brian, I didn't know we could do this for a full hour. This is like nerd nirvana. I want to thank you for having me to do this because it's been so nice to get my mind off of powerful child rapists being protected by a criminal president.
I what just to you brought it up. So here it is. To sit there and listen to J.D. Vance tell a reporter that Caitlin Collins needs to lighten up when she was asking about this first of all, and to have a laugh. I do not know how many people are going to have a laugh about having to ask a question about pedophiles abusing young kids.
I know, but again, I got to run. I'm sorry, but I'll just say that exchange shows how terrified they are, and it shows Donald Trump's greatest superpower of reframing the narrative. Everyone talks about how he mocked a reporter's disability. We don't talk about why, because the reporter wouldn't back up his lie about thousands of Muslims dancing on 9/11. Yes. Everyone talked about how he told Caitlin Collins to smile more. No one talked about why, to deflect from her question, which was, you and Pam Bondi have broken the law for over 50 straight days protecting these child rapists, and then you finally put out half the files and you reveal the names of the victims while protecting the men who raped children. Yes. That was the question. And he knew if he went and acted like a goddamn jerk off to her, that we'd all be talking about how sexist he is. And we are. The reality was he said smile more as a dodge because he is covering up men who put their dicks in children.
And to that point, the biggest problem I have with the press, with what we did, when I say support each other, I don't mean stand up for her. I mean, we should have followed up that question until it got an answer, and we failed.
And that's why they keep guys like you out of the room these days, Mr. Karam. I
Yes.
look forward to a real president having you back in there.
Well, God bless you. I'm going to be there next week. Let's see what happens.
Right on. Thank you so much for having me, Brian. I'm
Hey,
sorry I got to
anything
run,
you
but I
wanna
love your
plug?
show.
I love you too, brother. Anything you want to plug, go for it.
The book is Separation of Church and Hate. 8 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, and I have a Substack. Please check it out. John Fugelsang,
That sounds
thanks
great.
for having me. Peace.
This is Just Ask the Question. I'm your host, Brian Karam. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.